Beach Bucket Podcast is not really the place to talk about wind turbines, sonar mapping, but I couldn't stay silent anymore. In this episode, I talked to Tom Forkin, the director of Atlantic City Surf School, and very quickly we're going to get on the topic of wind farms and whale deaths. In the future, I will continue to have these discussions, and it will be on the Whale Truth podcast. You can't live on the East Coast and not be aware of the wind farms. Yet as summer approaches, people aren't talking about it. I'm a business owner in Ocean City. I have a podcast. I live a half a block from the beach, and I'm concerned. Welcome to this episode of the Beach Bucket Podcast, and today we are talking to Tom Forkin. Tom Forkin, who got his law degree from Villanova University, who is the director at Atlantic City Surf School, president at Forkin Consulting, and a teacher for the Atlantic City School District. Welcome.
Actually, it's the Atlantic County School District.
Oh, the Atlantic County School District.
Atlantic County Institute of Technology. I teach criminal justice and honors sociology there.
Very nice. How long have you been doing that?
Well, I've been back to teaching now for about 10 years. Left my law practice of 20 years. Went back to teaching and, originally started at Atlantic City Public Schools and then transferred out to ACIT, which is wonderful. We draw kids in from all over the county. It's a wonderful school district and, I'm happy to be there.
I interviewed on the podcast Greg Beck from Surfer Supply in Ocean City. Yeah. And that is a cousin of yours from Bridgeton, correct?
My cousin, yeah. We're more like my younger brother, but, we grew up together. He's a great guy.
So, are you a longtime surfer?
All my life. I grew up here at the Jersey Shore. Started surfing when I was 6 years old in Strathmere. My grandmother got me a board. I actually gave Greg his first board, when he was a little guy, so...
Now, I kind of heard a story about that Greg started surfing on his older brother's board that he got for a birthday, and the brother didn't use it for about a week. And
that was Greg. Yeah, that was Greg's first real board, because what happened was the board that I gave him, his older brother Basil broke.
Oh.
And then he got a board for his birthday, not Greg. But then Greg took his board.
The truth comes out.
The truth comes out 50 some years later.
So. Of course. It always does, though. It always does. You grew up going to the Jersey Shore. Was it Ocean City?
It started off as Strathmere, and then my family had a house. My uncle had a house in Ocean City, where we spent a lot of our summers. And I ended up, spending a lot of time in Atlantic City. I was in Atlantic City Beach Patrol. I started out in Upper Township on the Upper Township Beach Patrol. So, I grew up here at the Jersey Shore, lived in Atlantic City after law school. I had a small restaurant in Stone Harbor. Mimi's on 96th Street. So I, lived between Villanova and Stone Harbor. And then I would got the job at the solicitor's office as an attorney for the Whale Administration back in 1997. Mm-hmm. And, I've been in Atlantic City pretty much ever since. So,
without a doubt, you're interested and care a lot what's going on with the ocean these days.
Well, to say the least. I'm 60 years old. I've spent every opportunity I've had my 60 years, every summer, every, time that there's waves in the ocean. So, the Jersey Shore is a very near and dear place, to my heart. I've surfed in oceans around the world, as a member of the NSSA National Surf Team. And, that was back 82 through 84. But, you always come home to New Jersey and,
sure.
Home is where the heart is. So.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I started coming to Ocean City, in the summer. I grew up in Cumberland County as well.
There you go.
And have been coming here every summer my entire life and have lived here now for 12 years. Part of the reason that I invited you to be on this podcast today is views on wind farms. This background in law, you have a background of coming to the Jersey coast for all these years. What is going on?
Well, I mean, obviously, there's a wind farm development that wants to happen off the Jersey Shore. I don't think anybody understands the magnitude of this project. This project will absolutely decimate everything we know. And it's already started. And, first, a lot of people, and there's different spins on it, but the bottom line is what's transpiring is in direct violation of the federal Marine Mammal Protection Act. People can, like, the amount of information you can get, like facts. I mean, there's this back and forth that, because we don't like the windmills, that somehow, we're being paid off by the big oil companies. And we're the same people that protested the oil exploration and the natural gas exploration, over 10 years ago. I think it was like 10, 12 years ago. I actually spoke at a congressional hearing at the Atlantic City Convention Center, in which myself and dozens of other people from Clean Ocean Action, we showed up, with pictures of dolphins that were killed out in the Pacific, of course, through sonar mapping. The use of sonar is scientifically proven to lead to deaths of marine mammals. It deafens them, and marine mammals depend on their own inherent natural sonar to find food, to find direction, to avoid ships. Some of these whales, people are blaming, well, there's ship collisions. There's more ships in the ocean in February than there is in the summer, or more boat traffic. I don't think so. What's happening is, sonar mapping, basically sonar bombs the seabed, because the Ørsted wind farm needs to know, the terrain, the subterranean of the ocean, so they can lay cables. And that's something else we'll talk about, the cables, in a little bit. But what's happening is they're mapping the bottom of the ocean, disrupting first the whales, because the whales really don't migrate. But now that the dolphins are starting to migrate back, okay, now there's been recent dolphin deaths. Why weren't the dolphins dying before, people ask? Well, the reason that the dolphins weren't dying was because they're just starting to migrate back from warmer waters in the south, and that's what's happening. And this just isn't happening in New Jersey. It's also happening outside of New York, off the New York coast, off the Maine coast, off the Massachusetts coast, off the Virginia coast. Now, what the federal government has inappropriately done and really usurped the United States Constitution against the will of the citizenry is to sell, our ocean environment, those interests, to foreign companies in United States coastal waters, which to me is mind-boggling that, people have let that happen. Thomas Jefferson said, an effective democracy must be an educated and informed democracy. And what we have is people are just asleep at the wheel. Now, did COVID, provide big government, the opportunity, and special interest the opportunity, because everybody was so freaked out about COVID, and maybe rightfully so, but again, maybe a lot due to the media hype, but when some of this happens, nobody died of the flu during COVID. You ever notice that? Like usually, you have, tens of thousands of people dying from the flu every year, but I didn't hear of one flu death, this year. It was all COVID related, but the flu is COVID. So, but not to get sidetracked on that, the media controls the playing field. Now, what the media has done here is kind of, there's no conclusive proof that sonar has killed these marine mammals. However, there's enough tests. Now, the United States Navy conducted testing. The United States government, the United States Navy conducted testing on marine mammals in the Pacific, and they ceased their use of sonar in certain areas because they were occupied by marine mammals such as dolphins and whales and so forth. And they didn't want, dead marine mammals washing ashore in California, and they did not want to be guilty of violating the Marine Mammal Protection Act. So with that said, when we look at just what's happened for the preparation of preliminary issues, is that we're looking at dozens of marine mammal deaths. Okay. It's going to get worse. I mean, without a doubt, it's going to get worse. And that's the problem. And I warned people back when the first whale washed up, of all places, Whale Beach, south of Seattle, between Seattle and Strathmere. And, a dead whale washed up. And I knew that the sonar stuff was happening because we have a boat in the marina in Atlantic City. And, you could see the sonar ships leaving there. And then a colleague of mine online developed a method of tracking them, because captain's logs have to track the ingress and egress from major ports. So there's a number of sonar ships out there, and you guys can go to social media and look at, I'm wearing the shirt here, Defend Brigantine. You also have Protect the Jersey Shore, Save the New Jersey Whales. There's a plethora of organizations out there that are standing up and vocalizing against this windmill movement, which is, if you look at some of the posts on social media, again, the government's trying to sneak this behind our back. I looked off the stern of our boat the other day at the marina, and they're driving pilings into creating new bulkheading for service ships leaving from the Atlantic City. They're building a Orsted port across from where our boat is, from the Gold Nugget. Okay, so they're building a port for the ingress and egress to take personnel and service equipment out there for this. But what we're talking about here is the largest wind turbine farm, they call it a farm, in the world.
And we haven't even gotten there yet,
No.
because what we're talking about now is just the seismic surveys.
Yeah.
And what needs to be realized is that whales and dolphins echolocate, which means they find prey, they avoid predators, and they mate based on sound. They're not using vision for these things.
Yeah.
So if you go in and disrupt that, how are you not affecting their life?
And we're not talking about like the cute little windmills you see on your way into Brigantine and Atlantic City from the Black Horse Pike. These aren't the same windmills. Those windmills are maybe 450, 500 feet tall. We're talking about 1,000 feet tall, okay, to 1,200 feet tall with, the blades and everything else. They're going to be as tall as the Ocean Casino Resort, which is the tallest building on the East Coast.
That's unbelievable.
On the coast. So you'll be able to see. And again, a lot of the people that are criticizing those of us who are against the windmills think it's about, you're going to be obstructing our view and we're going to look out and not see. That's just a very small part of it. Not the core of the argument. The core of the argument here is, what is going on in violation of the Marine Mammal Protection Act. Again, we were the same groups of people that stood up against big oil. Okay, and if you look at this greenwashing, if people Google greenwashing, this is fascinating. Just Google greenwashing, and there's videos up there. Many of these big wind companies have heavy investment, if not part ownership. I know Governor Murphy has financial interest in the Orsted project. He owns a subsidiary that is helping finance, and he put it in his children's name. But he has an interest in that, and I don't even know how that's legal, or where the Department of Justice is on that issue. But when we look at big oil having a financial interest in developing wind, that's where they're kind of transposing this. And if we were financed by big oil money, this movement would have been a lot more expeditious. I mean, Defend Brigantine, they're selling T-shirts to raise money. I know the Long Beach Island group recently filed a federal action, which talking about the legalities of what needs to happen. And I said this from the very beginning, to put a stoppage to this. And I know Congressman Van Drew, I know him personally. He's a great guy, as is Testa and Senator Mike Testa from Cumberland County, District 1, Cape County also. Vince Palestina from District 2 here in Atlantic County. Great guys, okay? But it's not a political fight, okay? It just so happens that, one of, and I'm not going to mention his name because he's also a friend, but I don't necessarily agree with what he's doing. Now he's a lobbyist. He was a former state senator, also a Republican. He's a lobbyist for Orsted. You guys can figure out who that is on your own, but he's, I saw him at the Upper Township. They had an Upper Township meeting because they were rezoning the BL England power plant to have to put on the grid for this wind farm. The people weren't being fooled. They said that meeting had nothing to do with the windmills. It had everything to do with the windmills.
Of course it did.
Because the maps are already out. So it came down to one person, one vote. So when you think that one person, one vote doesn't matter, that putting that on the grid, digging through Ocean City. So you guys in Ocean City want to look at that one, and I'm not going to mention his name, but it was a 3-2 vote in Upper Township to allow that to happen. And as far as what's going on in Ocean City, from what I understand, Mayor Gilliam, did some things, made some deals, some backroom dealings. And then once he found out the public outrage of putting the cables through Ocean City, he kind of backed away from advocating for the windmills. Now he's against, but kind of flip-flopped on that issue. Little too little, little too late. Which is a shame, but, people have to be more involved. I mean, I teach my students all the time, in my law classes or political science classes that I'm involved with, that if you're not involved in the process, you can't protect the process. Like some people don't think that their vote counts or that their voice doesn't matter. But today with the internet, like with this podcast, I mean, thank you for giving me the opportunity to come on today. But people need to educate themselves on what the issues are. And shows like this that get the word out. You're going to have, hundreds of 1,000-foot wind turbines that are going to require pilings. They're going to require foundation. They're going to require above sea level 1,000 feet. They're going to require massive pilings. Each windmill or wind turbine holds in excess of 700
gallons of
petroleum each. So do the math. I mean,
well, I did the math actually.
Yeah, so,
and if you have 350 turbines off the shore of Ocean City and 700 gallons in each turbine, it's 245,000 gallons of petroleum just off the coast of New Jersey.
Yeah.
I mean, think about that.
Yeah.
So, and this is green technology that we're supposed to be talking about.
Yeah.
And the question on the flip side of that is, how many leaks does it take to clear a beach? How many leaks does it take to kill a few more whales? We haven't even gotten to that possibility yet.
And what's that going to do to our tourist industry? I mean, the Jersey Shore relies on tourism. So you're going to start to close beaches. Okay. In season, the water's a little bit more calm. But, what happens if a hurricane pops up? How are these turbines going in a northeast, hard northeast wind? I mean, they automatically shut down. So, not even talking about the capitalization of a foreign company maintaining, what's they propose they're going to be doing off our coast. But the towers have already started arriving in Paulsboro. There's a plethora of pictures on social media about that pulling into Paulsboro Port. I've seen them. You guys can look for yourselves. Atlantic City, if you go down to the end of, I want to say, New Jersey Avenue on the Bayside, you'll see them driving the pilings. And, the residents there didn't understand what they were getting into. Now, Orsted promised to resurface a couple roads and put up some stop signs or a stoplight. They haven't done any of that. I'm like, well, listen, this is what happens. You guys are going to go along to get along and get along to go along, but it's not working out and it's not going to work out. This is all about money. This is a money grab from, a foreign country, from our tax dollars, basically, is what it's doing. And they're taking away, our right to have a say. So, it's a two-pronged approach that this legal team has to have going into federal court. They need to show immediate and irreparable harm to the environment. They have to show that we have standing, which we do because we're stakeholders in the community. Okay. As a collective group, because I told a few people, if this doesn't
Are we talking about a federal injunction right now?
We're talking about a federal injunction, but the only way that injunction gets before a court, the federal court in Camden, expeditiously, is for this legal team, either from Clean Ocean Action or from the LBI group, is to go in an order to show cause. And to receive an order to show cause, you have to show immediate and irreparable harm, which, if that's not clearly evident now, I don't think it ever will be to a reasonable judge. And I think that, that can be stopped. I mean, when people say you can't stop something, legally, I mean, being, an environmental attorney and a bit of a constitutional wonk myself, I look at this and say, well, you had segregated schools in this country up and towards Brown versus Board of Education. Women weren't provided the right to vote.
True.
You had certain other inequities against the LGBTQ community. Justice Gorsuch wrote the majority opinion in 2020 to extend, equal protection to members of that community. I mean, the bottom line is, we're one people and we have to come together on this. And there needs to be a sense of civic and community outrage in all the shore communities. I mean, it's one thing for, a municipal official to say, okay, we're against it, and then they can sign whatever they want to sign. But to get this done legislatively, the yeses in support of this far outnumber the nays. And, tragically, it boils down to money. You have, a Democrat or Republican. I mean, those who are receiving money from these special interests that support this wind debacle, to really make it on the power grid and have that make a difference, it's not going to happen. Stay with the nuclear power. I hate to say it, but, the Salem nuclear power plant, they just re-upped their contract for another 45 years. Okay. And that power on the grid will be enough to power our region, so they want to go to more green energy. Well, this is not green, people. I mean, think about the pilings that are going to be driven and the noise from the pilings. How's that going to disrupt sea life? And you have, like you said, Gretchen, one oil spill, just like not counting the regular leaks, because the things do leak. You need you need a new gasket, or you need have you ever seen it? I can remember when I first moved to the Bay in Atlantic City. My ex-wife and I had a beautiful home on Massachusetts Avenue, and I looked out and there was like an oil slick on, like a gasoline slick on the water. It freaked me out, and I was going to go out my paddleboard. And I'm like, I got to call the Coast Guard. I called the Coast Guard because there were fishing boats right across the way from us, and I was upset about it. And that was only a gallon of petroleum that just slicked out the surface. It was minuscule, but it gave it that shine, that petroleum shine. This is a disaster waiting to happen. And if people don't collectively come together, and I know that a lot of people are pushing, but we need to get everybody in the boat.
I go back to what you said as far as it being not political. And I agree with that. I think it is, in a lot of ways, an apolitical issue.
Yeah.
You have environmentalists. Well, that's kind of broken down to some extent as well with this whole argument.
Well, when you look at the money that some of the environmental groups have received,
because how do you call yourself an environmentalist and then knowingly put 250,000 gallons of petroleum right off the coast of South Jersey?
Yeah, I mean, because they call it green energy, and this is what I mean by greenwashing. But it's not efficient.
It's not. It's not hurricane proof. No. And the research that I've done indicates that these turbines have a shelf life of about 20 to 25 years. And then what? They get decommissioned?
Yeah. And who's going to take them down and recycle? From what I understand, the recycled material that goes into these turbines is not that recyclable. It's not like something like a plastic or, some easy metals that can be, recycled. This is like a composite, like a polycarbon composite that they make these things out of, and the blades are super light, obviously, because they have to turn. And what's that going to do to the bird life too? I mean, the seagulls are I can remember now. Here's something I'll share with you, that when I used to represent a few clients on their bayfront properties, and I had to go up to the DEP a couple times in New Jersey, Department of Environmental Protection, and they were giving my clients a rough way to go. They couldn't drive new pilings into the existing footings. Now, maybe some people in Ocean City had this problem. I know people in Brigantine did, because I represented a few of them. But when I look at, I go back and look at my old notes, I have to laugh, because they were like, well, they can't drive the pilings into the existing footings because it will disrupt the shellfish beds. And I'm like, okay, this is like their riparian right to rebuild their dock. And we had to actually litigate it. And at the end of the day, I'm like, well, don't be shellfish. Tried to make a joke about it, but I'm like, we were successful, but it's their riparian rights.
This is some poor guy just trying to rebuild his dock.
Some poor guy trying to rebuild their dock. Now, fast forward to 2023, we're only going back, 20, 25 years. So now you're going to have hundreds of pilings being driven in, disrupting shellfish beds. What's that going to do to the clammers? Atlantic City, believe it or not, is the second largest shellfish, farming fishery on the East Coast.
Really?
The second one. If you go down Maryland Avenue, if you go down Rhode Island Avenue, you will see dozens of clam boats and scallop boats that are there. What's that going to do to their businesses? And who owns that? I think most of them are the Truax family, the people that live in Tuckerton, the race car drivers, the NASCAR guys. So I don't know, that's going to decimate their business as well as some of the other commercial fishermen down in Cape May. The migratory patterns of the fish, of the dolphins, of the birds. And now a recent study has come out where it could interfere with ships' radar.
I've read that.
Yeah, and it could pose a risk to national security. I mean, this was just an extremely poorly researched thing that wasn't vetted properly to the public. And you and I were talking before we came on air about the lack of transparency. Because there is a substantial lack of transparency that's going on here because people were just, pushed aside. And like we said, a lot of this was done apparently during the time when people were still jumping back from the pandemic. And this was done during that period. And maybe some of the wealthier special interests saw that as an opportunity to, hey, we can kind of, and run this boondoggle around the public and get everything in place where they think it's going to be too late. So it's never too late, And,
talking about transparency, one of the things that I've come across is the necropsies.
Yeah.
And how I was looking at Yale environmental report, and they said that whale deaths can be attributed to vessel strikes, and you can't get around that. And that there are more vessel strikes because of, since the pandemic, the ports in New York and New Jersey have increased by like 27%. From I think it's 2019 to 2022. And so there's more traffic going up and down the eastern seaboard. And because of the ocean temperature warming, you've got whales staying in the area longer. And that is the reason that you're having more of the vessel strikes. That is their conclusion. Well, okay, if that's their conclusion, then why are the necropsies not transparent? Because they're not. They're proprietary information.
Here's the evidence that we know. I mean, like if I was to, put my attorney hat on for a second, or any first-year law student could prosecute something like this on circumstantial evidence. I mean, there might not be any direct evidence saying, well, the necropsies show that the sonar mapping or the noise is killing the marine mammals. We know it's happened before. Okay. We know through the studies through the United States Navy. We know by NOAA's and own admission, because NOAA has what they call a take ratio that is allowing. Now, in that context, take means kill. So take means kill. So they have allowed a take of several thousand marine mammals, which in and of itself is a direct violation by another federal agency of a federal law, the Marine Mammal Protection Act. So you can't have, NOAA say it's okay to violate a federal law because NOAA is a bureaucratic agency. Okay, we have a federal act that was enacted by Congress, okay, that, you can't mix the two because we elect our congresspeople. You see the constitutionality that comes into play. Just like what happened to the people in Ocean City where Governor Murphy, for whatever reason, said, he didn't even declare eminent domain, but he basically took away through executive caveat of the governor's office saying, okay, we're doing this. I don't care what the people in Ocean City have to say. That's not only a New Jersey constitutional violation, that's a United States constitutional violation. And I mean, somebody has to have the cojones to say, wait, I mean,
hold on.
I wish I was still practicing. I know that there's attorneys out there that are kind of getting their heads around this and moving forward, but we need to move more expeditiously. We need to be more aggressive. As I said, the complaint has been filed in federal court. Now, that filing has to be contemporaneous, as I said, with an order to show cause, okay, which is a legal motion, okay, to get in to retrieve the necessary injunctive relief, which would put a stay on this debacle, okay, until the matter can be fully adjudicated. Now, that will automatically, a federal court, you cannot, trump that. They might want to go up to the next level. At the federal district court, they can go to a federal court of appeals. Maybe it goes before the, the Supreme Court of the United States. But in the interim, I'm confident that the Supreme Court of the United States would look at this and say, it's a clear violation of the Marine Mammal Protection Act, and it's a clear violation of the Constitution. Now, I'm rarely wrong on constitutional issues because I can remember back when I was an attorney in the Whalen administration and they came out with that goofy thing where, you could only have sports betting in Las Vegas. And I was like, Jim Whalen's attorney, I said, Jim, we could appeal that and challenge it on its constitutionality because you can't have sports betting just in Vegas. And if we want it here in New Jersey, you can't prohibit sports betting in New Jersey. Tom, I don't want to rock the boat. That's what he told me. And years later, as much as I was not a Chris Christie fan, and I wasn't, I'm still not, he had the temerity to challenge that and was successful. So now we have sports betting in New Jersey and at different parts of the country, and you have all these. I mean, it's $1 billion, multi-billion-dollar a year business, and you took the criminality out of it from the bookies and all the unsavory people, and here we are. I mean, now we're talking about a similar constitutional analysis where people think it can't be done. I mean, whoever in their right mind would have thought that you would have legalized marijuana in
True.
When we were kids, no, you did not think that at all.
No.
But, I think basically, and I don't want to make a joke about it, but, I think the reason Murphy was pushing for the legalized marijuana is because people have to be high if they think that he's doing a good job. He's just not doing a good job. It's like, no, hey, we're going to legalize marijuana. Everybody's going to they're going to think I'm going to do a great job. Yeah, just let Governor Murphy do whatever he's going to do. But he's not a clean player. I mean, and this is evidence of that. How can you, as governor, okay, declare New Jersey's ocean and coastline pristine and prohibit oil exploration, which we all supported? Okay, you did us a solid. That's great. We were against that too. But then turn around and do something like this? It's like hypocrisy at the highest degree. I mean, you can't have something like this. This is a nightmare. And this is going to be the ruin of the Jersey Shore. I mean, and I don't want to be the harbinger of things to come, but this is bad.
It is bad. And when I first heard, I'm an environmentalist. I owned a whitewater rafting company on the West Coast. I have been a tree hugger for a long time. And I thought, okay, what's the harm with a couple of windmills?
Yeah.
But you can't help but get the magnitude of what they're talking about here, which is 11 gigawatts by 4040. Ocean Wind 1 is 98 turbines off of Ocean City and Atlantic City. another 2 wind projects in southern New Jersey, Ocean Wind 2 and Atlantic Shores. And then didn't they just open the option for more permits in the last week or so?
I mean, they're doubling down their stupidity.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so they're basically ahead of schedule and saying we're wide open for business.
Yeah. And they're selling legitimately, it's a money grab. Not just by the foreign corporations, but by some of our elected officials. Mm-hmm. I mean, when I saw who I consider a friend, a former state senator as a lobbyist for Orsted, and he was trying to talk some of the people at the Upper Township meeting, when I'm talking about, some of the protesters, I'm like, dude, you are so out of your element here. Mm-hmm. I mean, he's trying, it's a good thing. This is good. And the power grid, we're not going to have energy. And I was like, what are you doing? I mean, just talking about people selling out. I mean, to compromise your core values. Mm-hmm. And that happens with some elected officials. And it doesn't, I don't believe it happens to, many, but it happens to some. And when we elect our elected officials, like people that supported Governor Murphy, if you do your homework, you can't support this wind project or some of the other ridiculousness that he's been involved in. I just don't see it. And for he and, President Biden, for that matter, to allow NOAA and some of the other federal agencies I'll give you an example. You have this legal action. It's a civil suit, okay, that's filed by the LBI group. Hopefully other attorneys from other groups, they can collectively collaborate on this singular motion. I want to get Clean Ocean Action involved. They lost their case up in Massachusetts to stop that. Mm-hmm. Okay. I mean, that's a shame. I didn't have an opportunity to read their complaint. But, connecting the dots here, if sonar kills marine mammals, and they denied that, but there's scientific proof. Mm-hmm. Let's follow the science. So then we know sonar is happening, and there's no ships doing sonar mapping out there. Then we found out that there was. Oh, yeah, there's a couple ships out there doing sonar mapping. So they had to concede that. That's number 2. And then we have, here's the dead marine mammals. Mm-hmm. So we know it kills. The boats are out there doing sonar mapping. Here's your although it's circumstantial evidence, it doesn't take a legal scholar to connect those dots and say, this is what's going on. But wait till they start to drive the pilings and do the drilling and all the other nonsense that has to go with this project. It's going to ruin everything we know.
Do you think people in this area are awake to what's happening?
No, I think that there's a few. I don't think that the masses, I don't think that there's any public outcry. I think all the local businesses should be disturbed deeply about, tourism. We have a tour. I have business interests down here. I mean, I'm not going to say that I don't have a shore business. I have several shore businesses. Mm-hmm. And my main concern is, how's that going to affect my business? Because not just the environmental piece. I mean, you have your legality of the violation of the Marine Mammal Protection Act, which is clearly being violated. It requires NOAA to conduct an investigation. Here's the kicker. It requires NOAA to conduct an investigation knowing that marine mammals are dying, but NOAA doesn't conduct an investigation. NOAA gave permission for takes. Mm-hmm. So that's a violation. I mean, the Department of Justice should be involved in this. Now, if we had a local prosecutor somewhere on the Jersey coast or any county prosecutor could, go after them for violation of the Federal Marine Mammal Protection Act, they might not say, well, I don't want to rock the boat. And, we know how that worked for whale, and we could have, had sports betting way earlier. But people that don't want to rock the boat, I mean, isn't that getting along to just get along?
It's time to rock the boat.
It's not time to rock the boat. It's time to tip the boat over and drown the rats. That's what it's time to do, because there's rats in the boat, and the rats are selling us out. And I can't make it any more clear than that. I mean, we have elected officials that have been elected to serve the public, not to serve special foreign interests. And if you look at the maps and look at what's going on, that's exactly what's happening. And there needs to be like a sense of outrage about that. I mean, I'm upset because, my grandchildren, they're not going to be able to enjoy, or their families, our families, when, decades from now, aren't going to be able to enjoy the ocean as we enjoyed it. We ruined it for them.
It's going to be completely different.
Different. It's going to be destroyed. We just have to say it's not going to be like a couple of little windmills out there. This is the industrialization of a pristine ocean environment when there are other ways to put power on the power grid. And this is not the way to do this.
What can people do in the community?
Well, continue to beat the drum loudly. I mean, we have voices on social media. I've been very active. I know a number of my friends have been very active. We need to start to recruit people, educate people as to what the issues are, to what's going on, and how to stop it. I mean, the legal recourse, we can have as many people barking about this as we want. But the bottom line is, until that order to show cause goes through, getting that injunctive relief, legislative change could be months, if not years from now. That's why we need the order to show cause, because there's immediate and irreparable harm being done. I know Congressman Van Drew has spearheaded a congressional effort to make the change. But unless, we have a team of lawyers, and there's the teams there, loosely configured, albeit, but they need to get it together, march into federal court, and demand an order to show cause for injunctive relief. Bottom line, unless that happens, this project's going to continue to go on. And that's the risk that we run. And it doesn't matter who gets credit for it, but just get it done, write your local congressman, or, call Murphy's office. And, because once this happens, I guarantee you, and you think COVID was bad for your businesses at the shore? Okay. This red tide, sea life, dead, washing up in the beach. People will cancel the rentals. You won't have people coming into your business. The beaches are going to stink of dead sea life. It's going to be bad.
Thank you, Tom. How can people get a hold of you?
Well, I have Tom Forkin on Instagram and Twitter and Facebook, but I'm just I'm just a member of Clean Ocean Action. I've been an advocate for years. Thank you for inviting me on your show. But I'm just an advisor in my capacity. I'm not, leading any organization, although we do have, dozens of people have contacted me about, and I've kind of directed them to Clean Ocean Action or defend Brigantine. And I think the leaders of those local organizations, and you have some wonderful, caring environmentalists, real, grassroots environmentalists. I'm not talking about, like, we've tried to lobby Greenpeace. We tried to lobby, even what broke my heart the most was the Surfrider Foundation. They let us down. I've been a member of the Surfrider Foundation for decades. And when Surfrider said that they were supporting the windmills, I'm like, you guys didn't do your homework. And then I got in an argument with a dear friend of mine. I'm like, dude, do you know what's happening? Do you have any idea? And I'm trying to fill him in. I'm like, I'm not going to argue with him. I'm not going to ruin a friendship over it. But, people need to understand the gravity of what's transpiring. This is not good. I'm not saying that people are like, oh, guys are getting money from big oil. This is still big oil.
Of course.
Big oil is backing these wind farms. If you wonder where the wind farms are getting their money from, it's greenwashing. It's big oil. They're just kind of changing their camouflage. This is not environmentally friendly. And I don't want to see our environment ruined. I know you don't, because our economy, our ocean environment depend on it. So